Tracy, thank you so much. It's nice to be here. I'm glad to have this discussion with everyone. So for my co-panelist, I would welcome you to jump on. Took me a second or two to figure out the WebEx permissions, but really good to have you. And Anders, I see you active, which is great. Welcome. Let me go back quickly, see if there's, great, Stephen and Anne, perfect. And then Liz is soon to join, my hunches. So with that, let's dive in. So today we're going to be discussing this and this topic, and we will have a couple of slides as we go. But to start off the discussion, the topic is DTX takeaways, and we're really going to be looking at the different types of frameworks that exist right now across Europe, and then how does that apply? What lessons can we learn? What are areas where we're seeing momentum build? Where are areas where we're seeing future movement heading toward? So what we're doing today is I'll be asking each of our panelists to do a round robin self-introduction, and then we'll be turning to each of them individually. So we will be starting with Stephen first, and then Anne, then Anders and Liz, who will each be giving an overview of their perspective on what they've been seeing, either in country or more globally or regionally. And then we'll dive into a discussion time. And then I'm trying to save the last 10 or so minutes for the broader Q&A for the entire discussion. So I welcome questions to be sent in as we're discussing, and we'll really try to make sure that we can answer questions live on site too. So with that, it occurs to me that as we're doing this, well, let's just do introductions first. So Anders, I see you online my screen first. So if you just at least want to introduce yourself, that'd be wonderful. And then we'll go to Stephen and Anne and then Liz.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Anders Tunold-Hanssen, currently now joining from airport in the southern of Europe. So I hope that the connection will be good. I'm leading what is called the Nordic Interoperability project, and we have since 2018 been working on how to connect these 5 countries in the north of Europe into becoming the most integrated health region in the world, as has been decided by the Nordic Council of Ministers. And as one of the initiatives there, we have looked at how to get digital health apps into the hands of the right people, either that being health professionals or individuals, who then building up a Nordic framework.
Perfect. And we'll come back and ask you for a full deep dive. I think, Stephen, would you mind to do a quick introduction next?
Yes, good morning all. My name is Stephen Vandeput from Belgium. I'm working at beMedTech, which is the sector federation on a national level in Belgium that represents the industry of medical technology. The medical technology is all very broad. I specifically focus on digital health, so digital medical technologies, medical device software, ranging from mobile health applications, digital therapeutics, also clinical decisions. And in that sense, I'm also doing daily operations of an initiative which is called mHealth Belgium, Mobile Health Belgium, on which we will touch up later in the discussion.
Fantastic. And I'm not sure if you have a few bumps in your connection or I do. So if I do, I apologize and I'll call back in. Or if I ever drop off.
Stephen, it seems your connection is not very good. Maybe try turning off your video so that we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, apologies.
But it's great to have you. So Anne, introduction on your side, and then we'll go to Liz before we dive into the full content.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anna Geier. I'm the managing director of the Association of the DIGA manufacturers. That's how we call the digital therapies that are reimbursed since 2 years in Germany. And I'm happy to share some learnings from these last 2 years, and looking forward to the panel discussion later with you.
Thank you. And Liz.
Hi, good morning. My name is Liz Ashall-Payne. I'm the founding chief exec at ORCHA. ORCHA stands for the Organisation for the Review of Care and Health Applications. We are interested in more than apps, so digital health at large. We just use that word because people understand what it means. And our mission is to improve lives through digital health. And what that starts with is understanding which digital health will have what impact for which people. And so we use digital health assessment frameworks to assess and evaluate technology to ensure that they are quality, and then really importantly, distribute them through the healthcare system. Looking forward to the panel.
Thank you. So now that you've met all of our panelists, and I'll really just be excited to help you moderate this discussion, wanted to at least start with a touch point where we're looking at this idea that there really is momentum building. And why we're talking today about digital therapeutics is, I think, a discussion point. But in this regard, oftentimes digital therapeutics are being authorized by some entity for the patient's use because they are software that's actually delivering a therapy. It's the notion that they have to be used for the right patient at the right time in many scenarios. So that notion of authorization and that notion of regulatory and even that reimbursement HTA perspective really does come into play then, because a patient can't just go online, download what they want and use it as such with digital therapeutics typically. So the notion of why we're discussing this really does all center around patient access and patient care. But one of the first steps we need to really work on is getting them recognized appropriately and really be able to embed them into the systems that clinicians will be using. So we've been seeing quite a bit of momentum building. Some countries have definitely taken the lead. Even in the UK, when they first came out with their NICE guidelines, it was incredible. I'd never seen an entity come out, a government agency, say, here are the types of health economic and clinical outcomes you need to be able to demonstrate based upon the type of intervention your product is delivering. So to see that happen, and then to see Germany layer in, and then eventually France and some others we'll be discussing, has been really exciting to see this really evolve. So what we'll do, we're going to take 5 or so minutes each, plus or minus. The order, as again mentioned, we'll start with Stephen, Anne, Anders, and then Liz, where they'll each take some time to describe what they've been seeing, how things have been going. And then after all of this, we'll break out into a discussion where we can really start to break down, look for some similarities, commonalities, and areas for discussion. So with that, Stephen, I turn the floor to you.
Okay, thank you. So I took off my video. Hope my Wi-Fi will be stable enough
Yeah,
to
you sound good.
discussion. Okay, now it sounds good. Can I share some
Yes.
slides? Because currently I don't have the...
Let's give it a go.
Okay, here I go.
Hey, we're getting there. Perfect. Perfect. Looks good.
Yeah, just very quickly, I want to introduce you to mHealth Belgium, a Belgian initiative focused on mobile health applications. The initiative has as a goal, it's a portal, mhealthbelgium.be, and it has as a goal to provide information in 3 languages. On the one hand, to citizens, patients, and healthcare professionals to guide them in the tsunami of health apps that are available. So it's a list of apps that are validated according to certain criteria by the government. I will explain a bit more details in the next slide. But on the second hand, it's also the unique portal for a company to register when they are interested in getting reimbursed on a short to long term. So I already mentioned it's according to certain criteria. So it works as a validation pyramid. The pyramid is looking like this since a couple of months. There are 3 levels. Level 1 is the broad basis, level 2 is the middle layer, and level 3 is the narrow top. There are 3 national authorities involved. So it's the Federal Agency for Medicine and Health Products that is responsible for level 1. This is about, here you have to show that you are a CE certified medical device. The second layer is more showing some criteria related to ICT to prove that you're safely connected. So here the eHealth platform is responsible, and the top layer, where everybody is most interested in, is dealt by the National Institute for Health and Disability Insurance, our national payer authority, and this is about reimbursement, either in a temporary way, which we call level 3 light, either already in a definite way, which we call M3 plus. Currently, if you look to the portal, there are 35 apps who are listed on the portal, all medical device software from different origin, for different pathologies and so on. Out of these 35, there are 12 who are already in stage 2, level 2, and there's one, specifically Move Up, who is in level 3 and who is nationally by the National Payer Authority reimbursed so far. The focus here is on mHealth, as the title mHealth Belgium says. So this means that the focus is not purely on digital therapeutics. Of course, there are digital therapeutics who are also mHealth applications, so they fit in it. But if there are as well digital therapeutics applications who are not a mobile health application, so they fit less in this. So this is a strategic choice that the government has taken, because the initiative already started in 2016 by doing some pilot projects to investigate what the value of mHealth applications in our healthcare system could be. So basically, here you see the definition. So it's about medical device software with a CE marking as a medical device that allows the patient to share from his home environment health-related information with a healthcare professional. It can be with or without a sensor. To be eligible also for reimbursement for level 3, it shouldn't be only one directional from the patient toward a healthcare professional. It should be bi-directional, that also the healthcare professional can use, often via a cloud platform, the system or the tool, the software, to do diagnosis, applying therapy, or do monitoring. Then with what is looking from an industry perspective, how do we look to the validation period nowadays? And in the next slide, I will show some lessons learned. So let's start with the positive side. It's a strong framework, simple and easy. It's a clear structure with 3 levels, so it's a stepwise approach, and it only has hard objective criteria, so no subjective interpretation. I already mentioned it's also the unique part for a company to ask for reimbursement financing. Thirdly, it's there has been much awareness. It's a national portal, so it's a portal that citizens and also all type of healthcare professionals can look to know which apps are validated by the government according to certain criteria. And it also has a strong international reputation, given the fact that I already introduced these so many in panel debates, but also to national governments abroad. But, and this is my last slide, there is also some daily practice, which is a bit less rosy than the theory. Of course, first thing is that the implementation of the 3 levels was very slow. So there has been 2 years in between the start of, I would say, having a level 1 in place, and then level 3 since beginning of last year. Regarding level 1 and the definition, only recently there is a clear definition what the boundary should be, and it's only limited to mHealth. So we should also be able to broaden this, for instance, to other digital therapeutics applications. In level 2, so this is about the ICT requirements. There has been the goal to have automated tests. Still, we are dealing with manual evaluation here. And then some aspects related to level 3. We believe that a fully objective and independent evaluation is still not guaranteed, because of the fact that different specialists or different type of healthcare professionals are doing the evaluation, which there's no always a financial incentive for them to move towards such a system with digital health applications. This is, of course, due to our financing model we have currently in healthcare in Belgium. Another point is that the procedure for an evaluation can take long. So just a clear example, 2-3 applications got evaluated positively in 2021, but they're still not listed in the portal because the care path in which they are active, be it oncology, be it sleep, still has to be reformed. So our Belgian Health Authority wants to reform the financing of a care path in such a way that digital health applications are embraced and encouraged to be used. But this takes a lot of time, and here there are no timelines or no binding timelines. So that's a big drawback. And then a last point is, of course, that the payer authority should focus on socioeconomic added value, while we see in the evaluation that still a lot of discussions go about data, about integration, GDPR, which should be tackled by level 2. So this is also a hurdle to have more embracement. And then this is based on all these previous points. There is a lack of new success stories. We only have one in level 3, and that's why other companies have a more hesitating behavior. I think this is a bit the lessons learned from my point of view, looking from a critical point of view also to the framework we have in Belgium. And I think it's also a good starting point later on to dive further into the discussion.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I would keep this slide handy if you're all right with that when we do dive into that next discussion. What I look forward to is others going through and discussing their perspectives on their own frameworks and then coming back to this to see, are these shared lessons learned? Are these shared issues? But I really appreciate your openness in discussing this. In many ways, you to me have been the face of this entire framework. So it's really interesting to hear some of this other side of it too, and figure out how can we actually work to overcome some of those. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
really do look forward to diving into the next discussions. Anne, could we turn it to you then? So going from Belgium to and Stephen's done an incredible job sharing this for the last couple of years, but then to Germany, where so much has happened. There's a lot of eyes globally on Germany. When you had HIH and a few others, there was a lot of buzz and other things taking place around there. But now, in my mind, you're now the face of what's going on with DIGA. So we'd love to hear from your perspective, what you've been seeing. And then, yes, we can see your full screen. So on that side then,
Yeah, sorry for that. It's actually a problem to share only, at least in the version. Let's check it on that if it works better now.
let's see. In the meantime, how about you do your introduction? Oh, wait, do you already have it?
Yes, I think now.
Yeah, there it is. Perfect.
But it's somehow I can. That doesn't seem to be right either. Sorry, I think I
You want
sent
to
it.
start? I know you sent me the slides.
Yeah,
I can try to find them
maybe you can
quickly.
also share. Maybe that's easier. Just 1 second. Just try it again because it seems to that it's not possible to just.
Part of the live show. No worries, Anne. We're here for you. You're gonna make it. We know that.
Yeah, let's try it
Wait, this
again.
is
Or
minor.
Megan, if you have the slides, you can also present.
I'm working on it.
No rush here.
So I think now it looks better.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
If you could any chance.
Strangest system I've had before.
Lovely.
Sharing.
All right.
Okay. So yes. I actually want to share some learnings of the last 2 years. I already mentioned in Germany 2 years ago, DIGA were introduced. DIGA are digital therapies that are medicinal products. They have to be class 1 or 2A. And the statutory health insurance fund reimburses them for 73 million people that are insured in the German healthcare system. And I just want to don't want to tell you about the whole framework again. I just want to jump into 5 learnings that we have from the last 2 years, as I said. So the first thing is that it's a mammoth communication task for the manufacturers involved, because DIGA are one of the first digital products in the German healthcare system. We're still waiting for an electronic prescription. We still don't have electronic health records for a majority of patients. And there was a huge demand for information. And these rather small companies, because most of them are startups that brought in these new innovative digital therapies, it was a big task for them with the small teams to actually inform the healthcare professionals, to inform the patients, to inform also the health insurance that this new element exists. The second learning was that the fast track procedure as we have it now, so it means that you have a 3-month period where you can try to get your product listed. We think it works in general, but it has some children's diseases. So we see a high rate of withdrawals from the manufacturers. And part of it is that it's not plannable in a way that we thought it would, and it's also due to the 3 months time period. So there's sometimes only a very short amount of time to answer all the questions that come back. And so the manufacturers have to withdraw their application and then try it again. And we think there's room for improvement regarding that. And we are also actually already put in some ideas how this can be overcome. And we think at the moment that healthcare professionals, they should be allowed to be more involved in the concept of DIGA. Right now, most applications are really focusing on the patient, and there's not much, there are not many, I can rather say there's no application that really focuses on a coordination between healthcare professional and patient, although we think it's possible by law. But it's always a question about also evidence generation. So is it possible to really show the effect of the digital therapy in comparison to what the doctor does? We think we should work on that and have more involvement of healthcare professionals in the whole concept. We need a user-centric, easy access way. I think this is maybe something specifically German. We don't have an electronic prescription yet, and we are waiting for that one also for DIGA, because right now it's quite complicated for the patient. He has to get the paper recipe, he has to bring this to the health insurance, this is something that is a new process, because normally you bring the paper recipe to the pharmacy and not to your health insurance. And it took a lot of time actually to explain this process, and it's far away from user-centric. DIGA manufacturers face a continuously increasing level of requirements. We got new laws regarding data safety, security, interoperability, this puts a lot of work and effort on the teams that actually deal a lot with fulfilling all the requirements. And at the same time, we have already changing reimbursement framework. So in October this year, we will have a ceiling amount for the first year for manufacturers. So it's really a challenging task to actually fulfill everything, and then at the same time, to have a ceiling amount and a budget impact on the other hand. And in this, I want to end up with a nice and good learning, and I think that's also why we're here. We see that there's a lot of attention across Europe and internationally for digital therapies, and this is because I think all our healthcare system face similar challenges, and I think, and this was mentioned before, it's a historical chance now to actually build a harmonized approach for a European assessment, and that would be our wish to, if we could manage to do this in the next years, to not have a study for each country individually, but rather see, okay, where are the common elements and where can we maybe build a European assessment way. And with that, I'm finishing and looking forward to the discussion with you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And I also just love the notion. I'm a pharmacist by background, and the fact that you're calling a recipe, I love that's the visual notion of like, I'm writing down the recipe for you and you get to take that in. A prescription, the word just loses all the value of that. So I love the historical reference there. And as a pharmacist, thank you. But that is really helpful to know too. And I would love to come back to the idea with the other panelists too later about the fast track process. I know there's varying different schools of thought in terms of, do we do this as a one-time process? You have to evaluate every single possible aspect of it, or do you do the fast track? But what you're saying is that maybe even too short. And I think that's really interesting to follow up on in discussion. So with that, I would love to turn now to Anders, who is calling in from an airport. And there's no mandate for slides. We'll welcome discussion on from your perspective too.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it was really nice to what was said at the end of the last presentation, this harmonization across Europe to get something done. And this is actually what we are doing, trying to do in a small part of Europe called the Nordics, which is then Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Norway. And the project that I'm leading is, we like to call it a Nike project, like Just Do It. And we want to work on cross-national data sharing and solution sharing across the Nordic region. These 5 countries have a history of cooperation, but also they have a Nordic Council of Ministers. So they have a decisioning body consisting of these 5 countries that make decisions. One of the decisions that they made was that and they made it in 2018, was that by 2030, the Nordics should be the most integrated health region in the world by 2030, which is just 8 years away. And this project was set up and initiated by the health tech industry, but then joined by several stakeholders on the way, and looked at where could we make a difference. And looking at the 2030 perspective, we saw that one of the challenges we had in the Nordics, and it's the same in Europe as well, is that currently we invest very much money on healthcare, which could be defined as sick care, because there is money running into the system when you have been defined as a patient, but nothing much is invested into preventative care. So the Nordics want to do something about that and want to change and shift that perspective to have more focus on preventative care. And then we saw that digital health apps could be of great help into the traditional healthcare system, but it could also have a major impact on preventative care initiatives, staying healthy, staying fit, following your own data. So when we, as a cross-Nordic initiative, looked at this, we saw that digital health could help us get the individuals on board, get them more involved in their own care, not only from a healthcare perspective, but also a preventive care perspective. And we thought that apps could help us do that. But to do that, we had to separate the bad from the good, or the good from the bad. And we had to get some kind of an evaluation framework into play. Now, working together with all of these 5 nations, we saw that all of the 5 countries had it on their agenda to find a system like that, either nationally or regionally, to put up a framework for evaluation of digital health. What we saw that with a regional approach or a local approach or a national approach, we wouldn't end up with the most integrated health region in the world by 2030. So we tried to turn it upside down and said, let's start to try to build a cross-national framework from day one. So with support from the Nordic Council Ministers, we joined up with ORCHA, who had done a great job in UK and many other countries, and had the expertise, and we said, let's do a cross-national initiative. And that has, over the last 2 years, been resulting in a lot of work framework, a lot of workshops, a lot of stakeholder meetings, a lot of discussions, to end up with the launch of the Nordic framework that was launched in June this year. So while we have close dialogue with the authorities, the health authorities, they have not yet kind of jumped on the ship, jumped on the train, saying this is the way we're going to do it in the Nordics. But while we wait for them to decide, we have launched a system for the industry to get on board and to steer towards quality.
That's interesting. Okay.
A stamp of approval for the solutions that they have. Because when you talk about digital health apps, you have the upstream side, which is in the industry going through an evaluation process, but you also have the downstream version of activation and implementation into the healthcare side. So it's a combination of industry focus and building the healthcare industry, but it's also about the healthcare sector being more efficient. So it's a broad perspective of stakeholders that has to be involved. And our experience is that this is on everyone's agenda currently, but it's very few who have an overall responsibility for making the decision how to go about to get a framework in place. So everyone is positive, but someone has to take the responsibility to say that this is the way we're going to do it. And that's currently where we're at in the Nordics. We have now developed a solution that could be a fast track to these 5 countries, and perhaps also to be a showcase for the rest of Europe, how to harmonize. And we start with industry, and we work towards the healthcare organizations to get them evaluated and quality assured solutions into their system to make the whole loop of our systematic thinking going and showcase. So we are just in the starting phase of this, but we now have a cross-border framework in place, and it's, as far as I know, the world's first cross-national initiative on this.
That sheds so much more light on what I had initially even understood from attending the session with him. So thank you for providing that background. I think it's a really interesting perspective that you took more of a broader digital health perspective as opposed to more of a medical device perspective to start.
Yes.
And
Yes.
therefore then having the industry perspective is different than having a government generated perspective, but then how you're working together with them.
Yeah, and this is really important, because when we were looking at DIGA, one of the initiatives that was on the way, they were focusing more on the MDD and the medical devices, while we saw that if we were to fulfill the vision of 2030, getting the individuals more involved, both on healthcare side with medical devices, but also on preventative care side to lift the burden from the traditional healthcare,
Okay.
we had to have a broader perspective on digital health apps. We also had to find solutions for evaluating and help the individuals to find welfare apps and preventative care apps of quality, as well as utilizing the digital possibilities in the healthcare side.
Great, well, thank you. And I know that you worked really closely with Liz, who I'm turning to next. So Liz, would love to get your perspective. Each of the discussions here, well, we started with 2 nation-based ones, one more regional-based one, and now you have a much broader perspective, I have a sense of too. So we'd love to hear your side, and then after that, look forward to having a broader discussion with everyone.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. I'm going to share my screen as well. Just let me know if you can see this. Hopefully it's going to come up. Not yet. Try again. Just share the whole screen. Okay.
We're working on something. Great. Oh, but
right,
we can.
Fabulous. Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. So one of the big differences from our perspective at ORCHA is we are not the organisation that sets the standard or the criteria, if you will. And as I said at the beginning, our mission is to improve lives through digital health, and obviously evaluating and assessing technologies is a core part of that, because we need to know which technologies meet the right criteria before we distribute them. And you can see here on the screen the big problem, which is what we know from our research is that only 20% of digital health technologies out there on the open market meet the quality criteria and the criteria that governments and policymakers are setting. And what we also know is that every day 5 million people will download a health app. And so what we already know is the big problem is out of those 5 million people every day who download a digital health technology, most people are downloading unsafe, unregulated and poor quality technologies. And that's a real missed opportunity. Now, as I said, ORCHA doesn't create standards, but what we do is we apply them and assess to them. And what we've heard already is a number of different digital health assessment frameworks from the panelists. So you've got the Nordic, we've also heard about the mHealth Belgium validation pyramid and the DIGA. Now there are lots of others as well. So you can see on the map, all these other areas also have digital health assessment frameworks. So here in England, we have something called the DTAC for the NHS. There's a new ISO standard across Europe. There's the Mindex in the Netherlands. There's the DAF in the United States, etc., etc. And we can assess to any of these different criteria, but one of the things that we noted when we started to look at these digital health assessment frameworks was that there was a lot of consensus. And what I mean by that is the questions that people were trying to find the answers to were the same. And so what we did at ORCHA was we thought, well, that is a real opportunity for us to share compliance data, because of course, once we know which technologies are compliant, we can then push those out to people, patients and healthcare systems. And so what we do is we've done a lot of work, and we continuously do this work, which is to look at that consensus and then look at where criteria might be different. And the next slide tries to represent this. So what we have is the ORCHA baseline review, which is the consensus across all of the different verticals or digital health assessment frameworks globally. So the ORCHA baseline review is not different to these digital health assessment frameworks, it just underpins them all. And the idea behind this approach is that if we assess a technology to that pink, the top of the pink area, what we know is that that represents about 70% of all of these digital health assessment frameworks. But what we have to do is just do it once for many. Now, that pink area represents around about 500 points or criteria that we assess to. It doesn't look like that's represented here, so I just wanted to make that point. And then what we do is we work either with a country or with a digital health technology supplier to support them in being able to comply with the vertical. So you can see that the first one is the US DAF, the Digital Health Assessment Framework for America. Now, of course, if somebody achieves compliance with that vertical and hits the additional criteria, those 3 additional areas, you can see that there's also consensus in the dark blue area. So if that technology then wants to achieve compliance with the EU ISO 82304 Part 2, you can see that they then just need to do 2 additional areas of work. If they then say we want to get into the NHS and become DTAC compliant, there's 1 more area. And this approach is all about sharing compliance data, do things once for many so that we can all get there faster to help to improve lives. Now, one of the things that I've heard Anders say a lot is you need a system, not a standard. And what that system is having a core infrastructure that allows for rapid assessment and, really importantly, reassessment. Technologies change all the time, and so does the framework as new standards emerge. And so we need a mechanism which allows for reassessment. Now, the way in which we assess is when we go through an assessment process. Of course, it's a manual process, but we hold the assessment data in our compliance vault, and we do a proactive reassessment every single time that technology updates and changes. Now, a reassessment is only reassessing the bit that's changed, and so a reassessment is very rapid. It can take as brief as 20 minutes. And what we can then do is share the information, but that isn't enough. That isn't enough as a system to just evaluate and assess. We also then need to share that information and also provide and support distribution and prescription through the healthcare system to get the right technologies to the right person so that we can see the true impact. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of an overview of the work that we do.
Thank you. It does. And I think this is where I would love to look at having this fuller discussion. And for anyone who's joining online, I welcome you to send in questions too. As I'm going, I have a few pre-written questions, but would love to welcome in others into the discussion too to make sure that we're answering yours as we go. But one of the things I want to just ask for the full group, and I don't have anyone in mind for all of these, but right now we've talked a lot about, I think, process and also the requirements. So Liz, you just spoke to a lot of the requirements, and there's a lot there that it seems already so buttoned up. I know things will keep evolving and we'll keep moving, and we have to keep looking at what should be versus what is right now. But when we're looking at that process, let's start there. Because Anne and Stephen, you both talked about some of the areas where you put forward the process and it's been working, but there's been lessons learned in the midst of it. So I guess, does that distinction stand out to you? And I would love to hear from maybe other countries who are looking to you, or other things you would like to convey in terms of process. Here's where to go, here's what to do, versus yes, we can harmonize the requirements. Sorry, I'm asking like 16 questions without actually asking a question. If you can harmonize the requirements, that's fantastic. And I think we all agree that there should be something there in that regard going forward. But in terms of process, can we harmonize that? Can we look to say, hey, lessons learned in Belgium and Germany are this, and therefore now we can scale process? Let's start with that question. Because then I think on Anders' side, it'd be interesting to say, hey, here's lessons learned, and then Anders could just pick it up. My hunch is the answer is probably no, but would love to hear if you think that that actually is something we could think about.
Maybe I can jump in. I think the answer is probably yes and no. No, because of the fact that every country has their own reimbursement mechanism, their own financing model, and this is dealt on the national level, not on the European level. That's why we are scattered in European countries. But yes, because definitely other countries can learn from each other, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, can take over similar processes, maybe fine-tuned even to their own system. So I would, look it from this point of view. That's why I got asked by so many different countries over the last years to explain our system, because we were at that moment a couple of years ago a front runner, being almost the first ones having a system, a framework in place. Of course, we are now also learning, trying to optimize it, to improve it. And these lessons learned that I am also happy to share, as I did, others can definitely take advantage of that.
So let's leverage that then even, Anne, into that question I was starting to ask you earlier about the fast track idea. That notion around that fast track does to me almost seem more process oriented around, here's the process we're going to undertake in order to determine if the technology is sufficiently validated to be used in our population and so forth. Is that something, because I've heard a lot of countries going from that mindset where you have to evaluate everything thoroughly, as I mentioned earlier, before you could even determine if it's acceptable, to now this idea where you can almost have coverage with evidence generation added into it and fast track process. What have you seen either with other countries, either build momentum looking to do the fast track process, or are there other recommendations or things that you would recommend in that process to countries who would be looking toward that methodology?
Well, I think the first decision that you have to take is if you want a preliminary assessment. I think it's super important. That's what we see in Germany, because the products come from rather small companies who need this period where they can do the big RCT, which is kind of the standard at the moment at the assessment of a DIGA. What I think in Europe, it would be a very big step if we would say, okay, we allow a study if it has been run in France, for example, but it has certain endpoints, medical endpoints, for example, where we would suggest that this might be probably similar in Germany if we could take this study, and it's possible at the moment to do that, to bring a study from another country to the assessment process, but no one has actually made it through. And it's
not encouraging.
Yeah, no, that I mean we have around about we have 33 DIGA at the moment, so it doesn't mean that it's not happening at all. But I think we need clear definitions when it's possible, so that the manufacturers can plan accordingly. And to my mind, it is possible. And we have certain, as you know, certain standards regarding data safety, data security in Europe. Germany did other regulations on top of that for the DIGA process, but I think it would be interesting to see, okay, what is our common alignment on that? And also regarding interoperability, there are international standards that could be the requirement for digital therapies. And then you have the question of evidence generation. And for me, it's possible to bring this together to have kind of a harmonized track where you can say, okay, as a company fulfilling certain requirements, I can use this study maybe to get the assessment in different countries, and then the reimbursement is always on national level. You will never have this in a European level, but I'm still positive that this will be possible, because I think for the small study, as the small companies, to do a study for each country again and again, maybe having similar endpoints, having similar patients that need the therapies, also for small, for orphan diseases, where only a small amount of patients are affected. It's very good to actually have a more European approach with that, for my opinion.
So I was just listening to someone from South Korea yesterday talking about how in Germany, it is not possible to use a RCT from another region. And I think that notion was, it's just never been done before, so therefore it must just not be possible. And it's making me think that every one of these pathways needs to have their own PR firm associated with it to educate and really be able to help bring clarity. And maybe, Liz, that's part of where some of the work that you're doing is, that you can actually help clarify some of these efforts for companies. Would you see that as part of the mandate, or what part of the role have you seen, Liz, your team playing in some of these notions where it comes to different frameworks, different regions, and companies trying to navigate them all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just one point I wanted to pick up on before I answer that question is, what's really interesting is what we're seeing is reimbursement isn't always happening at a national level. It's happening at organizational level or regional level. So, so I just wanted to make that point. So yes, it's really difficult, and that inconsistency and repeated effort is challenging for particularly industry, but also for the healthcare system. There's a lot of work to evaluate a digital health technology. It's not a small job, and you need a whole range of subject matter experts. So it's also quite it can be quite expensive. And we're really keen on supporting a reduction in that duplicated effort by sharing compliance data. And I think it was Anne that talked about doing an underpinning quick assessment. And I think that's the other thing that's really important. What you need to do is almost have a filter which knocks out technologies on the journey of compliance. So for example, when we do an assessment, before we even get to that baseline assessment, we do a rapid assessment. And that rapid assessment is just assessing some of the fundamentals of the technology. If a technology isn't meeting those fundamentals, then of course we'll give them feedback to support them to do that, but then we stop the evaluation. And then we move on through to that baseline criteria. If a technology hasn't met that criteria, there is no point in then going on to do further assessment and evaluation. And what that means is that everybody benefits, because the technology supplier knows what the rules are for engagement. If there is a direct link to reimbursement, technology suppliers are very happy to do that, but they do need some support. But also for the evaluation organisation, it means that you can just focus in and do the work for the technologies that hopefully will get through the criteria, rather than, you know, in order for you to get to 33 DIGAs, I think you said, you probably had to potentially assess 1,000. So let's try, you know, looking at that quality threshold, how do we share and filter down to the best technologies so that we can get them out to people?
And that is probably a matter of perspective too. And I welcome all the panelists to be jumping in here too. But Anders and Liz, as you've been talking, I've heard a lot more about more of that holistic digital health technology ecosystem. Whereas when Anne and Stephen, you're talking, I've seen more CE marked devices. So you're talking more specifically right away about the medical devices. So it's automatically the subset. And I think there are these Venn diagrams that are so complex in terms of what qualifies as a DIGA, what qualifies as mHealth in Belgium versus the digital health ecosystem as more broadly.
And I just to pick up on that point, if it's okay, Megan, ORCHA, we can assess the full depth and breadth. Of course, there's always the question, which is it a medical device or is it not a medical device? Because that clarity is a bit tricky. But I think that, you know, to Anders' point, people are already using these technologies. It's the opportunity is not just in medical devices, it's in the full depth and breadth, but the assessment and the evaluation needs to be proportionate based on the risk that the technology has within it. So if a technology is a medical device, it's diagnosing, for example, it's pushing and pulling data, that's a far riskier technology than, say, a digital recipe book, which was once a book and it's now on an app on your phone. So we need to be proportionate in those assessments. And I think that, again, is about efficiency, but it's also about being realistic in what the criteria needs to be for the technology that's being presented.
And then Anders, to bring you into this, I want to make sure we still have a good connection.
Yeah, I can't see you, but hopefully you can hear me. So just confirm that you hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Because when it comes
perfect.
to the discussion of harmonization, I think that from my point of view, we will look at this from a systematic approach, where we kind of have the upstream industry side on one side and the downstream healthcare organization side on the other side. I think that at least what we should be able to harmonize quite quickly is the evaluation and the evaluation criteria. And the reason for me saying that is that is one of the logics behind trying to get a cross-national solution in place in the Nordics, because we say that a quality assured app, an app defined as quality, or digital health solution defined as quality in Oslo, should be of quality also in Helsinki. I mean, it's not that much difference. But if we make this too difficult for the industry to actually go through the process, at least for small countries like the 5 Nordic countries, the app developers won't turn to the Nordics. They will go to some other bigger markets. So we have to make it easier for the industry to go through the process and be willing to be in these small countries and offer their products to have the best solutions for the citizens and for the patients. So I think that evaluation criteria should be possible to harmonize. when it comes to implementation of digital health, that either being directly towards citizen portals or through the professional channels, that of course is very much more depending upon the national setup of the healthcare systems, which we know is very different. So a starting point, as I see it, is that a quality app in Norway should be defined as quality also in Spain. I mean, it's not that difficult, but we have to agree upon the criteria. But we have to make it easy for the industry to actually be willing to go through the process. And there has to be something in the other end for them, a market or a distribution possibility across a broader enough market for them to have sustainability. If not, the whole digital discussion will be a theoretical discussion in the healthcare sector when they look at digital opportunities and say that there's a lot of opportunities for digital health, but there won't be any suppliers willing to be there for them because it's too complicated to get approved. Then they'd rather go to another different market. So let's at least start with harmonization of evaluation processes.
Yeah, we're in a really incredible place in the industry right now where we're starting something that's so new that has a history. So this is not completely novel in every way possible, but trying to create the pathways for this new category of medicine has been something that we've been looking at for quite a bit. So having these discussions is really great for me to be a part of. So there are a couple of questions that came in, and the panelists, I think you can all see them in the Q&A down here, and we can move back to some of the other initial questions we had earlier. But what we're looking at here, manufacturers' perspectives, one of the questions came in, are there any recommendations if I wanted to prepare for multiple countries in parallel? And I think Liz and Anders, you've already touched on quite a bit of this. I'd be curious, just Anne and Stephen, though, have you seen this raised to the top of your concerns of companies coming and talking to you about this? Or else have your interactions been more one-on-one, country specific without looking more broadly?
Well, maybe I can start. I think so when manufacturers ask us, okay, what are the requirements in the other countries? Because as we discussed, the requirements at the moment are different in each country. So and then you have additional questions regarding how's the ecosystem? How do I bring the product to the healthcare professional or to the patient itself? So even that is like so country specific. And yeah, I think right now it really means to be really up on track. What are the regulations coming up, for example, in France with the new track, and then maybe planning the product with different languages, and also maybe already having in mind in your study design that you don't have too many country specific factors, for example, in your comparison group in the study. If you need to do a study, maybe have a look if this is a very country specific the comparison group, or if it's something that could be also transferred to other countries. Although I don't know at the moment how it is in other countries to actually try it with a study from a different healthcare sector in Europe. So yeah, at the moment it's a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and it's super difficult to scale it up into different countries. I think it needs a big team and a lot of money and time.
I'm actually taking that one down as a note too, that control arm design. I hadn't thought about that. It's a really, really good point. Thank you. And then Liz, if I can give you this next one, the one that talks about peer-to-peer online cancer support group. There's someone who's been looking at, who is doing this right now, where they run a strong moderation perspective within the product to ensure safety, reliability, and appropriateness for the community generated content. How does ORCHA engage with entities like this, and how? Oh, perfect. Turn to you.
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, I'll give you a really good example of this layering approach and how you start to get end user feedback, which I think is what the question is about. So what we do in the Netherlands, working with the GGZ, is we assess the technology for compliance with standards and regulations, and we evaluate those technologies to make sure that they are safe and quality. What our partners then do in the GGZ is then go out to the end users and gather end user feedback on their user acceptance and how they have experienced the technology. And the reason we do it that way is because there's no point in distributing unsafe, poor quality technologies to end users. We want to at least make sure that they're safe and regulated and then gather that feedback. Now, again, what we're back to is not just that theoretical viewpoint, but also the process. How do you do that at scale and pace? Well, we're talking about digital, so you do it digitally. So you gather feedback from end users, which is basically a bit like a patient-reported outcome measure, but you're gathering it back at pace and scale. We also work with charities in a similar way here in England. So working with a charity, we will be able to say these are the safe technologies that have met compliance requirements. And then the charity may say, for example, we've worked with Macmillan Cancer to say, okay, do these technologies work in this context? So, for example, when we worked with Macmillan, the areas of interest were around sleep, anxiety, and stress. So we were able to say these are the compliant technologies in those areas. Let's now do some user benefit work with your communities who are living with cancer, and what is the user acceptance like in that environment, which is obviously very different to say if we're working with a mental health charity and we're deploying those technologies into a different community. So I think that it's about layering, and it comes back to this point, let's share compliance data, let's just promote the technologies that are safe and quality and regulated.
Thank you for answering that perspective. What I want to, okay, I'll see if you have a question. Okay, so the last question I want to ask, and I think there's like a two-pronged approach to this question, so maybe everyone gets to answer it or choose the question they want. But one of the questions I want to end with and just do a round robin on is what needs to occur in the next 5 years to really enable this to really reach patients at a mainstream level. So that's the first question. And the second question is also deviating a bit, but question from the audience came in multiple times here around like, please talk about like your personal driving aspect of this. Like, how do you intend to be engaged in this and see this grow too? And your motivations for this. So maybe we can combine them a bit, but would love to ask that. I'm not going to pick on anyone, whoever wants to answer first, and then we can just go from there.
Okay, maybe I shall start. I think that's a good question, because it's in the end all about how to raise the adoption, how to get it widely spread into our healthcare system, be it for healthcare professionals, be it for the patient. And I think adoption starts with as two aspects. On the one hand, it's about creating awareness and getting trust, and on the other hand, it's about financing, especially in healthcare. Adoption as also coming with financing and reimbursement. Of course, reimbursement we discussed earlier. So that is about policymakers that has to be convinced about the added value, and maybe also in our case, at least in Belgium, we have to shift the way we finance care paths or activities, and we have to move away from the fee-for-service we have nowadays, and more go to a value-based healthcare mechanism, where we have, for instance, bundled payment mechanisms instead of payment per act. So that's about the financing. But the first one, awareness and trust, that's also an important one we should work on in the next 5 years, because even if you have a financed mechanism, the users, be it patients and healthcare professionals, still have to be aware what exists, and if they are aware, need trust in the mechanism. So this is something we have to build at the same time. We can do this via pilots, we can do this via informing them different ways, but I think these are the two angles I would look to it, to have in a couple of years a more widely spread use of these digital technologies.
Thank you. Volunteer for who's up next?
I'm happy to come in. I think, you know, the analogy that I often use, and Megan, you've heard me say this before, is around how we distribute other things in healthcare. And the most obvious thing that we distribute is drugs and pharmaceuticals. And in that vein, what we have is a whole infrastructure that allows for the licensing and then the distribution. That distribution starts with training for healthcare professionals and then a prescription infrastructure that allows for health and care professionals to prescribe drugs to patients. And that is exactly what ORCHA are trying to promote and deliver through our products and services. Because what we do is we evaluate and then we distribute through specific channels, be it at national, regional or organisational level. And that starts with training. And then the healthcare professional can then prescribe or recommend a technology by a text message. And then if there's a reimbursement flow, we know what's gone where to whom, did they click and download it. And I think we've got to think about the distribution as much as the evaluation, because until people have got these things in their hand, we've not really done anything, we've not achieved anything. And in order to do that, we do need safe, well-governed infrastructure. And as I say, training is a big part of that.
Thank you. Even though I've heard you say, I'm still taking notes.
Well, if I should say something, then I would just echo what Liz is kind of saying, that at least for the Nordic region, one of my main messages is that we have to focus on systematic thinking. We have to focus on evaluation and activation going hand in hand. We don't need a lot of quality assured solutions just laying around. We need a lot of quality assured solutions in the hand of the right people, that being either the health professionals or the individuals. And we have to have the focus on both the distribution and implementation, as well as evaluation at the same time. And then we get this systematic approach that we need to get this floating.
Lovely. And then Anne, to wrap us up.
I think everything has said before, not by everybody. I think there's a sentence in German saying that, so I can just repeat what the other said and just maybe highlight user-centric ways for the patients, in plannable way for the manufacturers to get to the reimbursement, yeah, just including also the healthcare professionals, because they are the ones that need to prescribe it, and they are the first contact point. And because I'm also a pharmacist by training, I think pharmacies, at least this is something that has not been taken into consideration enough, I think, because it's the first touch point for most patients, at least in Germany. And I think we should also think that through, if this is a good touch point also for a hybrid way, like digital elements and the first touch point regionally for each patient.
Well, with that, our hour flew by. Thank you all. I love that this was a reason for us to get together, and I'm really thrilled that everyone else has joined us. But personally, just this conversation amongst us, I've really benefited from, and I really, really love this discussion. I love where we're heading. There's so much potential. So with that, thank you all, and I guess Georgi, we pass it back to you.
Lovely. Dear panelists, thank you all for your active participation. It has been very beneficial and a lot of important topics were raised today.